Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Velvet Lounge Life. It has been such a good day that I decided, no more hesitation, no more over planning. Let's get this Bakelite button video done and dusted. So there was inspiration behind why I'm doing this video, and it's because a beautiful soul that I met today actually gave me some buttons. And she gave me 3 Bakelite buttons, and you will see those in a minute. And I was just like, yes, let's just do this. It's such a happy day, such a good day. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look at, as you know how I am, I love playing with my little buttons. We're going to look at some buttons that are Bakelite examples. We're going to talk about the history, things that you should look for, things that you should know as far as storage and testing, etc. We'll even talk, and you know I don't talk about this a lot, the values. The reason I don't talk about the values at an exorbitant amount of rate or information simply is because I actually collect buttons. I use them. So selling them is like, honestly, the last to the furthest thing, far, far, far away in my mind. So if you're here for lots and lots and lots of value information, you're only going to get a little bit, but it will be enough to help you out, I promise. Plus, if you have questions, look at the description of this video down below after this video is over for more information on contacting me, etc., etc. So without further ado, so most people don't know that Bakelite was created by a Belgian dude in 1907. So that means and I'm not 100 years old, but to me, Bakelite isn't as old as I thought originally years and years ago when I took all the buttons that I had from being a child, teenager, young adult, up into my seasoned years, I guess I'll call them, and started putting them together into groups and doing more and more research, etc., and just getting more knowledge. So I, for some reason, always thought that Bakelite was just so much earlier. Like, I would even say I would have probably thought that it was invented around maybe the 1880s, but not true. Invented in 1907 and patented after that by a Belgian guy out of New York, Yonkers. Go figure. And some of and we're going to talk about the pros and cons of Bakelite. And a lot of people try to tell you there are no cons. There are tons of cons with Bakelite, and most of them have to do with safety. But so here, let's just talk about this picture. We have this gorgeous, beautiful, probably about the size, a little bit bigger than a nickel, an American 5-cent piece, swirl button. So you could tell it has the swirls in it. That was one of the positives, and there are many, of Bakelite, was the fact that it was so easily molded into any shape imaginable. Whether it was to be used for something industrial, Bakelite was used in wars, people. Bakelite was used in telephones, pieces of jewelry. I mean, the telephone itself would have been Bakelite, not that part of it, but all of it. The handles of scissors, almost anything you can imagine that a hard plastic could be used for. There was a time period where Bakelite was the go-to plastic for that. And obviously, as we all know, the beauty of buttons, because if you can make jewelry, why not? And so Bakelite, was, and also toys, which is kind of scary, and we'll get to the reason why for that. But it's just it was just such an easy material to use because of the molding factor, but also because you could easily add color to it. Now, there were some colors that took to Bakelite better than others. And the most popular colors are brown, black, red, yellow, butterscotch, green. So you could swirl these colors together. You could have them, in most Bakelite you will see as a single color, but I do have some examples for you of where the Bakelite has been swirled, and obviously it gives a different effect when you mix these things together. I heard someone say at a show once, and I don't know if this is true at all, is that usually when the colors were mixed or swirled together, it was because it was sort of like slag glass, which is like leftover glass. And at the end of the day, you took what you had left over and you made whatever remnant pieces out of that. And let's look at another picture. Let's go to this one. So you could see this swirl. I call this a candy button because, come on, that reminds me of chocolate. That reminds me of butterscotch or even toffee, but maybe a little more butterscotch-esque in this two-hole button. So as you can see, the colors could be mixed together like this, but they also could be just kind of put in and really mixed together where there was no definition of this being brown and this being a tannish color. They would just sort of like marble it, if you will. And one of the things, though, in the making of these buttons is the fact that, you know, they had to be very aware of drying time. Also, some of the other positives are the fact that the material is heat resistant. Okay, we say heat resistant. However, obviously, there's always a maximum temperature when too much is too much. Your house is burning down, everything's melting. I don't care if it was proclaimed to be heat resistant or not. So obviously, when they say heat resistant, what they're talking about is for everyday usage. And in some cases, yes, for military usage, because like I said, Bakelite was used in the military as well. Let's just look at this one. This is a button that I had. It's a shape of a Zeppelin. This is a big beauty, and those in the button world know that big beauties are considered buttons that are abnormally large. So this is a button that probably was used on something like a swing coat. And the swing coats would come below the knee and they would sort of create a tented effect around the body and be a little more shaped and styled at the collar and in the sleeves and sometimes on the chest area as well. And there could be pleating, of course, in the back. So you can imagine someone having one of these nice big beauties right there at the throat of the jacket, and or on a cape, and just looking absolutely divine. And the thing you can't see on this one is this side is this rare apple green. If you could see the other side of this, it's a purple. Purple was a very hard color for them to get. In my opinion, purpliciously correct. I say that as a person whose favorite colors are purple and black. So I know what tone of purple I like. Now let's get into some of the cons. And another positive is the fact that, as I stated, all sorts of usages for Bakelite. You know, everyday items that a baby would touch, to something that, you know, someone 100 years old would use, to the home, to work, to military, to utilitarian, the decorative, the list went on and on. So some of the unfortunate situations with Bakelite, you know what, let's get into that in just a minute. And the reason why is because I can't cover Bakelite without talking, and I'm going to move this because I have super surprise for you guys, some live eye candy for you to look at. Let me just reposition this so that you can see inside the tray better. I think that's better. I think that's good. I think we have everything in there. I'll actually make this larger and pull the camera back a bit. I'm going to make sure you can see everything. I think you got it. If you have it, raise your hand. Let me know. So, something, like I said, I don't believe, it's just my opinion, of course. I don't believe you could talk about Bakelite and not talk about Catalin. We are not going to spend too much time whatsoever, I promise, talking about Catalin, simply because that's not the purpose of this video, and we will have a separate Catalin video coming out in the future. Now, Catalin is commonly confused, or Bakelite is commonly confused with Catalin, or Catalin with Bakelite, vice versa. The reason why is they actually call it faux Bakelite, or fake Bakelite if they're not being kind, or if they're being very je ne sais quoi frou-frou, they will call it French Bakelite. French Bakelite is Catalin. These are all nicknames for Catalin. And if you test for Catalin, and I'm going to tell you how to test for Bakelite, you do it the same exact way. There is a distinct difference in the scent. Now, I do have to say this. You're basically sort of taking a chance on your health when you're breathing in these toxic fumes. So the only way to test and get a result is to literally put a chemical on top of things these are made from chemical compounds, some of them deadly dangerous. Beauty obviously can be deadly and dangerous. And what you would do is, for Catalin, you're trying to smell for burnt or sour milk. If you do it correctly, you will get one of those scents. If you're testing for Bakelite, it has a strong chemical scent, and how you would test for Catalin or Bakelite is you would use Simichrome. And Simichrome you can actually buy almost anywhere online, and it's spelled Simichrome. That is Simichrome. It's Simichrome. And that is the #1, to me, most reliable and only best way to test for Catalin or Bakelite, is to use this chemical. It comes in a tube, and you basically just use a little bit, make sure that your pieces are clean and free of debris. Make sure they're fully dry. You did not use any chemicals to clean them. Just a little bit of warm water will do it. And then after they're completely dry and they don't, you shouldn't really be able to overly smell anything. You might smell something a little bit because of the chemical compounds that these are made from. These are decades upon decades old, and they still will have that weird, unpleasant chemical scent. So you have to sort of get used to that and understand what it is before you use the Simichrome for testing. And when you put that tiny bit of Simichrome on the tip of a Q-tip, you just I would test on the back area, somewhere discreet. Just sort of rub it on in a circular motion. You don't need to press. You don't need to put a ton of it on. Pretend that you're brushing the teeth of a 2-year-old child and do that. And then what I do is I actually just leave it there for like maybe 15 seconds and then go in with your nosh and give it a good snifferoo. Now, unfortunately, when you're breathing in the chemical reaction, you're breathing in, obviously, the chemical from the semichrome, but you're also breathing in, if it's Bakelite, formaldehyde, and other toxic polymers. I can't say that word. Polymers. There you go. Can you say polymers 10 times fast? So that's just something to be aware of. And in Catalan, same idea, except that chemical compound for that plastic is different. So you're breathing in toxic chemicals as well, just different toxic chemicals. But formaldehyde being a big component in Bakelite is one of the reasons why it was taken off the shelf decades ago as something that would be commonly found, touched, used, put in the mouth. Imagine a child seeing these. Honestly, these look like candy. Like, if you're a young child, you're probably going to put two of these buttons in your mouth. You might even chew on them, even if they're attached to your clothes. Obviously, if you accidentally leave them around in the sun or in a place where there's plenty of heat and light, they do give off a chemical scent. So just imagine you're, sort of breathing that swirl of toxic chemicals. So that's one of the reasons why for now, when Bakelite is used, it's used in industrial, applications versus, like I said, something you would now find on a coat or in a piece of jewelry. Obviously, just because this stuff is out there still by the hundreds of millions. I know people who only collect Bakelite in any type of Bakelite item. And if you walk into their home or if they have it in their shop, you smell this weird scent. And I hate to say it. I mean, if you've ever really smelled formaldehyde, then you would know what that scent is. Yeah, you shouldn't be breathing that in at all. And it's not the most unpleasant scent, but it's definitely something that you're like, I wonder what that was. So just, some of the things to be known about the French Bakelite, aka Catalan, versus real Bakelite, and I'll even call it American Bakelite, which was invented in 1907 and patented afterwards. This all that you see on the tray right now is Bakelite, and I just tried to pick out a few colors. I could have gone crazy, to be honest with you. I was not like a big collector of Bakelite, but I had quite a bit of it, and many of the items have found new homes. I'm going to say maybe 15, 20 years ago. And then I kept, obviously, some pieces. And that piece that I showed you, that's a Zeppelin, that's in a very special collection. But I'm not allowed to talk about where it is, but it's possible I can say this. I just can't be specific about where it is. It was considered to be museum quality enough that is how you would be able to see that piece. And that piece has been in its new home for, I'm going to say maybe 5 or 6 years, something like that. So some of the cons of Bakelite, before I pick these up and show you each one of them in more detail, are, like I already talked about, it's really, to me, the number one issue is the toxicity. There's asbestos involved in the making of Bakelite. There's formaldehyde involved in the making of Bakelite and other toxic chemicals. So just something to be aware of. And let's talk about the fact that I know we talked about the heat resistancy, But just like anything, this is prone to damage. And the damage that happens to it the most, and I've seen this myself, is crackling or even cracking of the item. So that happens usually because the item was not properly stored, because it was in the sunlight. Makes sense. Let's just pretend that it's a telephone. If you ever see one of those old-fashioned black telephones, those were all made of Bakelite, and of course sometimes there were other colors. And if you look at them, they almost remind me, like the ones that are damaged remind me of leather a little bit, because the Bakelite got so dry and just so damaged from heat and from the sunlight or whatever. And there is a way to sort of refresh it, which we'll talk about briefly as well. So that happens. The other thing is just straight up cracking. And usually that's a combination of not being stored. Like, for example, if you find this stuff in an attic, let's just say it's been up there for 80 years or something like that. It's possible it could be in perfect condition, or it could have cracks or crackling in it. And usually that, like I said, is due to how it was stored. If it was left in direct sunlight and also like the heat got to it, obviously more damage. And there's no way to recover those. Those are just damaged. There's nothing you could do to fix them. Another con is the fact, well, some people consider this a con. When Bakelite was invented, one of the things that people found as a con is that it was not transparent. So that meant that you couldn't use it in certain applications. It's like, for example, if you had a radio and all of the radio casing is made of Bakelite, they also were trying to figure out a way how to make the face that protected the little components inside so that you could see your little dial moving back and forth. They couldn't figure out how to make Bakelite transparent enough to use for that. So they had to use a different material for the faces. Obviously, they would have loved to have been able to make all of the casing and the facing and the dials out of Bakelite. Much simpler than trying to combine two different things. And you have a Bakelite company, then you have another company that's making another part, usually glass, and obviously glass being breakable. You know, they were trying to, which sounds horrible, but they were kind of trying to get away from glass. Obviously today, with all the environmental issues from any type of plastic, styrofoam, whatever, we wish that they would use glass instead of plastic. So funny how history completes a circle sometimes. The last, it is the last. And I actually just tried to pick out like the top 4 or 5, is the fact that Bakelite is dense. So in order to get this gorgeous look, this can't be thin. If this was thin, then once again, that cracking that we talked about, Bakelite would be more prone to cracking and breaking. But because they found that it had to be made thicker for whatever components, and we're talking buttons today, that's why some of this has stood the test of time all of these decades, is simply because of the density of the material and the component that was made out of it. So let's talk about storage. So I told you some of the negatives, which were the fact that if this stuff is not properly stored, you could have these items just sit, and usually they are in a box or they are in a metal tin or something like that. And they could be in something plastic, wood, cardboard, who knows, plastic bags, whatever people store stuff in. But when you open the box, if it was stored in a hot area, the scent would hit you in the face a bit, if not a lot, depending upon how hot it is. But something that you should do as far as storage is store them So what am I telling you? Store them in a cool place. Or at least a climate controlled place that is, constantly below, I would say, 80 degrees. Just throwing it out there. Some people would say below 75 degrees or below. Obviously, the colder, to be honest, the better. The other thing is keeping, I mentioned this numerous times, keeping these items out of direct sunlight or even artificial light. Like I have this super bright light here shining above my head, for extended amount of times. Now, come on, you guys. Like, if this sat out in this artificial light for 8 or 9 hours, not a big deal. But obviously, if I was displaying this and it sat here day after day after day, year after year, the colors would fade. So you would find the front side is much lighter if you flip these over than the back side if they were stored like this and just sat like this for years. The thing is, artificial light is more friendly to the Bakelite. Sunlight is its enemy. So you would not want these to even sit in sunlight for a couple of months on display. What you would want is to make sure that if you, let's say you were doing, I don't know, a display at a library or something like that, you would want to make sure that these were not in a direct sunlight area. So let's take a look at some of these little goodies. I hope that little bit of history, was helpful as far as the storage. Oh, and cleaning. Cleaning is super easy. These can go in the washing machine. Don't put them in the washing machine. So what you would do as a collector is you would take these and simply use a child's soft toothbrush and a tiny bit of ivory soap and just gently give it a little rub. And I do mean gently because you don't want to scratch anything or whatever. And make sure that if you have like the 2-hole, 4-hole buttons, whatever, just make sure nothing gets stuck in the holes. Or if you have, like, these are carved, you want to make sure that nothing gets into the carving. And if it does, you just want to make sure that you get it out really well. And you can rinse these really well. The only thing is, if they have metal shanks, obviously the shanks could rust or get a verdigris disease, as I call it, if you don't completely dry them. So you just want to do that. Some people will even go over these with a beeswax and even turtle wax, that stuff you use on your vehicles, just to get because some people love them to be super highly polished. I just like them natural, the way that I found them or the way that they were given to me. So I don't know if you can see, here comes the old pointer. This black button is not as shiny as its neighbor, the round button, because it just isn't. Why? This one may have been washed more, whatever. Like there's, age, maybe the way that it was stored previous to me obtaining it. It could be anything. And then here we have these gorgeous 2-hole orange buttons. I'll pick one of them up. And you can see it has this beautiful, like, sort of like faceting in it. And yes, as I said, 2 holes. And this is what inspired me to do this video today because of the beautiful sole. We have these, and these are big beauties. Let me get my handy dandy John F. Kennedy silver dollar out so you can see how big this is in comparison. So, oops. I have to find a better way to hold things in these videos. But you guys know me. I always drop something. So you could see that he's kind of dwarfed by her. She's a big, beautiful beauty. And once again, 2-hole. Love this Art Deco design. Super deco. Absolutely stunning. Like I said, I mean, this is a horrible thing for me to say just for safety's sake, but these do remind me of candy. That's the reason I think that so many people love them. They're just so tactile, you know, the shapes, the colors are brilliant. As you can see, we have these formed green buttons here, which are absolutely stunning. Also, I would even say these are probably like a deco, so there's several deco designs here. Deco in design. Just trying to stand one up. There you go. And it actually has like a wave. That's why you see this beautiful, how it hits the light. The light hits it here. Then we have this gorgeous, like very futuristic, once again, very deco in design and style, butterscotch. And here we have these yummy, I call this a Granny Smith green. And it's like one of those toggly, as I call them, toggly is not a word, buttons. So this was probably used, I'm thinking because of the size. And this is, let's see how long this is in inches. I think it's like maybe an inch and a half. Nope, yeah, this is like 1 inch, almost on the money. Maybe a tiny inch and a tenth. But my thought is that this button probably was used on a child's coat or jacket. So you could see a child, if this was disconnected, looking at this, thinking, I'm putting that in my mouth. And the thing is asbestos, formaldehyde. So it's some things to remember. And then we have these butterscotch, like yellow and butterscotch, this butterscotch with a metal shank on it. And then this is just like what I call a standard, but a self shanked button here in this yellow color. And then we have more of these gorgeous oranges, but this shade of orange you can see is not as shiny as that shade of orange. So these were probably washed more, used more, etc., etc., whatever, you know, helps them lose some of their luster. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe to the channel. It really does help. And it also really helps when people comment on the videos and watch them or listen to them if you don't want to watch them for 15 minutes or more. Lastly, please check out the description. I'm saying that again because there's tons of useful information there. And I actually have been asked recently about ways that people could support the channel. That simple information is down below. I've had offers of cash and all sorts of things, which I am so blessed and thankful to you guys, but do not send cash. You don't need to do that. But if you have samples of buttons you want me to look at, yes, you can send me some buttons so that I can analyze them and look at them right here on this channel for you. Oh, and let's look at, I'm sorry, I skipped over these little carved, I'm calling these carved, but to be honest, Bakelite buttons were never carved. See, bonus material. They were always molded, but these almost look carved. They're not, they're fake carvings. But these are little red Bakelite buttons that were, once again, like the rest of these, molded, but just the molding is deeper in them. But anyway, thank you guys. Be well. Please take care of yourselves. Please come back again. Enjoy your lives and enjoy yourselves.